So we talked about that. Let's transition now into the topic of today's discussion, which is cellular health, right? You're a master of that, autophagy, MToR. I loved how you talked about just already the body's innate intelligence and how we could harness that by just removing the interference. So the shots you gave me didn't heal my back. They're not going to heal my back. They're allowing my own body to repair and heal its own self, which is the body's capability to heal, this innate intelligence. So how do you use something like autophagy, mitophagy, and MToR, the opposite of autophagy, to harness this innate intelligence?
Yeah, you know, it's so what they've discovered in recent years is that we have this kind of feast-famine, phase. And so it's like you have a sleep-wake cycle, and there's a feast-famine cycle as well. And they are linked to the sleep-wake to some degree, because often when you're sleeping, you're fasting. So calorie intake is really at the core of what dictates this signaling. So I like to call it a signaling, because that's really what it is. And so you're either signaling your body to grow and repair, or you're signaling your body to clean and recycle. And so they were looking in the soil, actually, in Rapa Nui Island. People know, like, Easter Island. And they found this substance called rapamycin. And they started giving this substance to laboratory animals and C. elegans and different types of creatures, and they found that they lived much longer. And they're like, oh my God, we found like the holy grail for extending life. And so then shortly after, they discovered that it was activating a certain set of genes called MToR, which they call mammalian target of rapamycin. So it kind of makes sense now. Next time you hear MToR, it won't be as elusive, right? So it has to do with Easter Island.
Yeah.
And so this whole process is either MToR is activated or it's inhibited. So when MToR is activated, it means that your body's growing and repairing. Now, if you look at how we live now, like, we have access to food, unlimited food, all season, all day, all night, and we take advantage of that. Food is a comforting thing, and we like to eat as a culture. All over the world, and Americans probably as much or more than anybody.
More than others, yeah.
And so when you're feeding, you're inhibiting your body to actually clean and repair itself, which isn't a good thing. So we want to start to balance that out, and that's where the intermittent fasting and fasting has become so popular, because people are finding that it's mitigating a lot of diseases. They're literally able to reverse diabetes. They're improving people with cancer, the autoimmune diseases, degenerative neurologic diseases. All of these things are responding so favorably, because if you look at a lot of diseases, there's a connection where there's too much growth, like cancer, it's too much growth, right? Cardiovascular disease, the endothelial lining gets thickened, right, and it crowds things out, and you have deposits of, so a lot of our diseases really is a consequence of too much MToR.
Too much MToR. In spurts, like you mentioned with those C. elegans and whatnot, in spurts it can be super healing to the body. But when you're constantly in this anabolic phase of MToR, then you have bad cells that start to duplicate, leading to disease and dysfunction.
Right, so balance is the answer, right? And we don't have balance as a culture. So what's really interesting about this is that when you start to dip into this, you become more metabolically flexible. And when you're fasting, you're starting to use fat as a fuel source. So individuals can either start doing a ketogenic diet to start to train their body to use fat, or they can fast, or both. I think that working with a ketogenic diet initially, starting to get that metabolic flexibility, makes fasting so much easier.
I agree.
People that aren't metabolically flexible will eventually become metabolically flexible once they start doing some more extended fasting, but it comes with some suffering, because you're dipping into some very low blood sugars and cravings. And so, there's a lot of crossover with ketogenic and fasting, and this whole conversation that we're having is very appropriate to your listener base, for sure.
Yeah, the way that I teach it and the way that I wrote about it in my book, the Keto Flex book coming out, is the first pillar is getting into ketosis, right? Teaching your body to utilize fat instead of sugar, which we know it's a cleaner source of fuel. And then once you become metabolically flexible, 14, 21 days or so, then we start doing intermittent fasting strategies, because you wouldn't just run a marathon without training for it, right? Same thing, if you've been a sugar burner, eating every 2 to 3 hours, and then you say, I'm going to do an 18-hour fast tomorrow, it's going to look ugly, you're going to hurt yourself. The brain, when it starts to go low in glucose, will start to panic, send the body intense signals for carbohydrates and for sugar. And even if you have the best willpower in the world to ride that out, the body needs to get glucose from somewhere, so it'll turn protein into gluconeogenesis to fulfill the brain's desire. But when you go into it already in ketosis, being keto adapted, fat adapted, then it makes it much bearable, because then you just burn through your sugar reserves, your glycogen stores, and then you just go into your fat stores, and then it's just an easy transition.
Yeah. And one thing that I thought was fascinating is that, when you reflect on our ancestors and when they had to hunt, I mean, did they hunt hungry or did they hunt with a full belly?
Hungry all the time.
I mean, they're out there. So we were designed to utilize ketones as a much more efficient fuel source. So anybody that's suffering from degenerative neurologic, so the heart and the brain are the most metabolically, demanding organs in the body.
Right.
So anybody that's looking for improvement with cardiovascular function or neurologic function really should look at ketosis as a great option.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of my favorite benefits of utilizing it as a tool, what it does for my brain and what it does for my mental focus, clarity, productivity. So when we start practicing fasting strategies, the process that takes place is this repairing, it's catabolic phase called autophagy. Now the Greek definition for autophagy is eat thyself. And the body, we mentioned, is the world's greatest physician and has this innate intelligence. So I'm going to give an analogy for autophagy, and then I want you to go into the science of how it works in mitochondrial autophagy. So the analogy I'm going to share with you, my audience, let's say you are there's a real estate mogul out there, right, who they specialize in flipping houses, and they have an entire team, because those who are successful have a big team that works for them. So they go around their city, they look for houses that are probably burned down, there's mold, houses that need to be cleaned up, they purchase it at a low price, and then they send in their crew into the house, and they start looking at the house, how can we fix this house up, how can we repair it, if it has damage from a fire, how can we paint over that, how can we fix that. That's kind of what's happening when we fast. The body is so smart, it activates autophagy, and then it seeks out these 70 billion cells per day that need to go through this process. And if it has determined a cell has no function, so this house cannot be rebuilt, we have to actually destroy it altogether, then it activates apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. So that's just like tearing down the entire house and then building up a brand new mansion that looks lovely. And all of this is happening inside of the body just during the fast. So I explained the analogy component just so my audience understands it, and I'll get into the scientific part of it.
Well, I love that analogy because cell actually means little house.
Yeah.
And I use a similar analogy, but when I talk about it, it's cars. Like, I'd say if you were to look at your city and say, if you could go through and find all the automobiles that are old, they're hogging too much gas and they're spewing too much pollution, and you were able to figure out which cars those were and replace them with new, more economical cars, the city would run on less gas and it would be less pollution. So I think that that's a valuable part of this puzzle, because the cells have mitochondria inside of them, and these are the little guys that are taking oxygen and glucose and making energy. And so this is either efficient or non-efficient. And so when after diseased situations, chronic inflammation, aging, the body loses the ability to see and recognize these old cars or these old houses, and they accumulate. And so you start to get these accumulation, and some of these become what's called senescent. And
zombie cells.
They're zombie cells. And so they're you imagine like an old car that's just literally, it's leaking gas, it's leaking oil. These cells are incredibly inflammatory. And they're linked to many diseases, and including aging. So if we can clean these senescent cells up, virtually every disease, whether you're, a weekend warrior, you just want to play better and harder, and have more endurance, or if you're suffering with something, you have mold illness or Lyme disease, or you have an autoimmune condition. So really, I think the full spectrum, there's a lot of benefit for people to like dip into this cleaning up. So autophagy is really a global term, but when you get down, your body actually does this with the mitochondria, and that's called mitophagy. And so that's where the body goes in and sees, oh, okay, these mitochondria, they're not pulling their weight, and they're actually causing a lot of trash buildup and so forth. We're going to recycle those. And so there's different signaling factors to this mitophagy that I think are really worth talking about. And one of my favorite, and it's something that we've done with you in the clinic, is intravenous ozone.
Yeah.
And so oxidation is a signaling factor for the body to recognize that there's too much oxidation and that there needs to be an enhancement of the antioxidant buffer system. And so this buffer system is activated when that signaling of oxidation is heightened, right? So it's dose dependent. There's nothing more oxidating than ozone. So ozone's O3. So in the clinic, we'll run intravenous with patients. For people that are home, we like to have them use ozone generators and maybe rectal. I know this is going to sound kind of odd for people watching this, but it is a very common technique to greatly enhance health. Is to put gas, ozone gas, rectally, and hold it for a short period of time, and then that gets in the blood. There's saunas that you can get. You can drink the ozone. Dr. Frank Schallenberger is kind of the father of ozone. He was on my Cellular Reset, ultimatecellularreset.com, and we did a video together. And I've been to his clinic, and so when we start to look at patients where we're looking to enhance the process of a fast, and we want to enhance the process of autophagy and mitophagy, we're starting to look at the science and what types of things we can do to stack this to your favor. So when we have people in a fasting zone, we give them something called Senolytics, so senescent cells. What counters senescent cells are Senolytics. So lytic in science is like breaking down and clearing out. So Senolytics, a lot of them are these polyphenols, which curcumin, resveratrol,
Fisetin.
Fisetin's my favorite,
Yeah.
right? Fisetin or Fisetin.
Yeah, either way.
That's from strawberries.
Yeah.
Green tea extract. There's lutein is another one. So these generally aren't great, easily absorbed orally. Like curcumin, it's a huge thing. It's like people do either liposomal or I haven't really seen many people putting this into a suppository, but this is one of the reasons that we've tried to make it. Now, we have been able to source curcumin intravenous, which is from Germany, and that can be really amazing for people that have a lot of inflammation. We'll put that in saline and we'll run that as a drip, but it's hard to find, it's expensive. You can get the same effect with a suppository or a really good quality liposomal. So we created something called Lucitol, and it's part of our phase 2 with the MitoFast. So we just released this. I wrote an article for Ben Greenfield, and it was released, I think, just like a couple days ago. And so if you're interested in getting a little bit more information about this MitoFast, which we're going to start talking a little bit more about now, it's a 3-phase program where we're stacking these science into your fast. So we have a pre, a during, and a post support for that. And
Yeah, I love that. So for the audience listening right now, they're probably wondering, okay, I want to be able to enhance autophagy. So let's start with the basics. What are some fasting schedule strategies for them to do that? And then what are some easy ways, supplement-wise, for them to actually purchase some supplements to enhance it during a fast?
So before I dive into that, I want to talk about NAD real quick, because that's part of the pre. And one of the challenges that I found is that when you provide NAD, I love it because you're giving a lot of energy to the mitochondria, and every 20 years you get a 50% decline in your NAD levels. And if you're not sleeping, you're having alcohol use or chronic stress, you're greatly depleting your NAD. And I think for the most part it's probably like accelerated with everything going on with the
stress,
the
toxicity,
pandemic and so forth. Yeah.
What's NAD?
It stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. So it's kind of a cousin to niacin. And so this is a substance that the mitochondria uses to make energy, and it becomes depleted very quickly. And so the challenge is that we can give NAD in the form of NAD in an IV. We can do it, we have a suppository that we're using, we have a liposomal, there's patches you can use, there's intranasal approaches that you can do. The challenge is that it supports your cells, but it also supports senescent cells. And so a lot of people think that they can just take an NAD support like every day, and that's not something that I support. I think it's much more intelligent to do pulsing with the NAD. Now there's also precursors that are pretty phenomenal, like nicotinamide riboside.
Right.
They also call it NR, or nicotinamide mononucleotide, which is NMN. So what we've done is we've created a product called Nad Max, or NAD Max. And NAD Max has NAD, it has NR, and it has NMN, and it has fisetin, so you're actually getting a curbing of supporting the senescent cells while you're on NAD. But what we're doing is we're stacking and we're loading NAD prior to going into the fast. So when people go into a fast, their cells are charged, so when it starts to want to pull energy for autophagy and to clear senescent cells, it's got a little bit extra juice to do that.
That's awesome. I love that idea, like a turbo boost for a car.
Yeah, so you're kind of priming the pump.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a stock, is it a suppository, NAD Max?
Well, so NAD Max comes in a liposomal. So we call that NAD Max Ultra.
So you're swallowing it?
Yeah, so it's a liquid. Well, there's a syringe that it comes with, so you can measure exactly. And actually, I'm on day 1 of the fast, so I'm and Dr. Michael Rice is also joining me on a fast.
Yeah.
He's on day 2.
Right.
So we're taking the phase 2 of the Mito, the Mito Fast, and we're on Lucitol.
So for phase 1 was the NAD stack. You take that right at the beginning of the fast?
So we have this for 2 days or 3 days. So each phase can go for 2 days or 3 days. So for the 2-day phase, which I'll often have a lot of my patients or clients do 2 days of NAD loading, and then during the 2 days of their fast, we'll have them do a 24-hour or 36-hour fast while they're taking the Senolytic and all those polyphenols with Lucitol. If they have access to ozone, we like them to utilize ozone. And then exercise is also helpful for autophagy.
Right.
And then following the phase 3 is where we get into all of the stem cell activation. So it's easy for anybody to do. I mean, anybody can do a lunch-to-lunch fast.
Yep.
And so we've structured that where people can ease into this, and eventually we want to see people getting where they do the 3-day, where they do 3 days of NAD loading, and then they do a full 3-day water fast while they're on the Lucitol, and then after that, a full 3 days where they're supporting stem cells. And we have a lot of upgrades. I don't even think I've shared some of these upgrades with you, but.
Wait, so was that a 9-day fast that you're talking about there? Or they would break it after 3 days and then start another one for 3 days?
No, it's a 3-day fast, but there's 3 days prior and there's 3 days post. So it is a full 9 days for the protocol.
Okay, yeah.
Now, something that we started to look at as well is the benefit to the microbiome with a fast. So it's a stressor to the microbiome. So if you think about, you have all these critters in your gut, right? And so you take away food, you take away their nutrients. It's really doing the same thing for them that it's doing for you. So you're going to have some attrition of the weaker, bacteria that you probably want to clear out.
Like SIBO, even Candida.
And some of the bad bacteria will kind of work its way out of there. And then once you start to refeed, that's when the microbiome can actually come back stronger and more robust, and you have stronger strains and stronger populations and colonies. One of the things that we started to look at is something called swarming, and nobody's talking about this, but microbiome swarming. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Okay, this is brand new.
Teach me.
So your beneficial bacteria have a circadian rhythm just like we do. So they go through a sleep-wake cycle, and so one of the effects when we go to sleep is it's our regeneration. Our body switches into repair and regeneration. And so the microbiome does the same thing. So when they're swarming is when you're sleeping. So they go into this like super growth phase during sleep, and the primary activator, I'm going to ask you your guess, the primary activator to the swarming is what?
Growth hormone?
What's my favorite
melatonin.
molecule? Yes!
Yeah.
Yes, melatonin. And gut melatonin is 400 times stronger
Right.
than it is in the brain.
Yeah.
So your gut literally produces melatonin for this. So that's why we start to walk people's melatonin up to some really high levels during their post-fast, is we're accentuating that microbiome swarming effect.
That's super cool. Wow.
Yeah.
There's like an amazing method here, a scientific method that makes so much sense. I've never heard of the swarming part, but it all makes so much sense. The gut doesn't produce that much melatonin.
Yeah.
So how could somebody, is there a way to test, right? If somebody does a 9-day water fast without any of this versus doing a 9-day water fast with this structure, how can they test to see the difference besides, how they would feel? Is there a way to look at glucose and ketones? What are some ways to test to see the differences there?
Well, we are working on some more science with this so that we can show this to, we have a lot of doctors that are doing this in their clinic, and I work with Dr. Pompa on a lot of this. Probably you and I don't know anybody that's more, of a scientist, biohacker when it comes to like fasting, right? I mean, he's got the Beyond Fasting book, and a lot of your listeners probably know exactly who he is.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So when he did this protocol, he was blown away, and he had some, and then he started working with a lot of his clients using this method, and he's finding that he's able to achieve in 3 days what he would normally have people fast for 5 plus days.
So he's probably looking at glucose and ketones, because the goal for what Dr. Pompa teaches is to get this maximum autophagy ratio, which typically happens in day 5, some people day 7, where we get blood glucose divided by 18 compared to ketones. And if you have a 1-to-1 ratio or better, that's the maximum autophagy ratio that Dr. Thomas Seyfried has seen actually tumor cells shrink before his eyes. So what Dr. Pompa is saying, he gets that achieved in 3 days versus 5 days by using these supplements. So that's fascinating. I want to do it myself. So if Dr. Pompa is doing a 3-day, how is that stacked? Do you start with the NAD stack on day 1, and then how do you go from there if you're doing just 3 days?
Yeah, so an example would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're loading NAD. And so you'll dose the NAD 2 or 3 times a day. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you would fast, you would do a water fast, and you would take Lucitol, or if you wanted to do it on your own, you could find some polyphenols that you could load up with, and then after that we have phase 3, where we're the Sandman is the high dose melatonin that we utilize,
right?
And Dr. Pompa,
and we talked about it in the previous episode.
Yeah, so
but that's a 9-day fast. You said he was doing it a 3-day fast.
Yeah, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday is the fasting.
Oh, got it. So Monday,
Sunday,
Tuesday, Wednesday you're eating,
Tuesday,
but you're loading up on the NAD stack, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday you're fasting,
right?
Loading up with those polyphenols, quercetin, etc.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So the post, I think, is as important as the fasting. So a lot of people don't necessarily. Some people feel really good fasting. Not everybody does. But you're going to go and you're going to create this signaling to break down cells and tissues, to clean them out, and to recycle them. And so after the fast, you want to signal the body to go in there and repair them. And so that's where you want to actually activate MToR. Now, one of the exceptions to this might be if you're dealing with cancer. We may skip that. We may definitely not want to go in and do a lot of stimulating of MToR really ever.
Right.
But for most people, we want to let it rip, and one of the biggest signaling factors for MToR is protein. And in specific, it's lutein. So we have created a product where we have lutein, and we have something called HMB, which is a byproduct of lutein that the body accumulates, and then we have deer antler, and then rhodiola is actually a really good activator of MToR.
Interesting.
As well. Yeah. So that product's called StemToR, and so that also comes in a liposomal, or it comes in a suppository, kind of tastes vanilla-y. And so you increase your protein intake. I'm a big fan of the essential amino acids as a supplement. So we'll have people supplement with essential amino acids. The perfect aminos is the one that we carry.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of Ben Greenfield's Keon aminos, that would be a similar product. And then they naturally will increase. Now, I had a patient come in recently that was having an extra inflammation and he was just starting his phase 3. And what he did is he ate a bunch of beef, right? So I think for some people that might be okay, but with that first day or two, you might want to be gentle with yourself and look at things that are, like maybe tofu or some gentler protein sources. Eggs is a good one. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, because the body is during a fast, it's starving down bacteria in the gut, and it's starving down HCl, some of our enzymes. So if you break it with too much protein, especially animal protein, right off the bat, you don't have the enzymes to support that. So you could always supplement with some digestive enzymes that could help, but it's not a good idea to go full on with the animal products right when you break the fast.
Yeah, and so then you get this huge signaling to release stem cells. Right, and then we all want that. So I mean, we're talking about like you could go and spend 20 grand and get stem cells in Switzerland, or of course we charge a lot less than that at my clinic. But or you can go through this MitoFast, and we called it MitoFast because it's focused on the mitochondria, it really has a far-reaching effect even beyond the mitochondria. So we have this accentuated release of stem cells from the bone marrow into the system, into the circulation. And this is something that we struggle with in the clinic as well. Is like, let's say for instance we did your spine with like bone marrow, right? And I felt like you were older and the damage was much more severe, and so we really need something stronger to repair it. And so we would pull your bone marrow, and then we would do those injections with the bone marrow. With stem cells, you are naturally going to have, thank you, you're naturally going to have a certain percentage of them go senescent. I mean, this is very well published in the research, and all of the people within the area of regenerative medicine are looking for ways to change that and improve the situation where you have less senescent, stem cells. And they don't become these reckless, spewing, situations. They're more like you lose the benefit of those stem cells. So to minimize senescent cell, there's some things that we were really looking at the research with. So fucoidan is a extract of brown seaweed. It's a polysaccharide. Japanese love it. You look at, there's some whole websites on fucoidan, and they use it a lot for cancer. And one of the things that I found is that the support it has with mesenchymal stem cells and preventing them from going senescent.
Wow.
So the other thing that, and there's a lot of Chinese herbs that can do that as well. And the other substance that I really was impressed with the research was CoQ10, but in a higher level. And again, CoQ10 is not very absorbable. But so what I did is I made a suppository with both fucoidan and CoQ10 at a high dose. And we call that Stem Zen.
I love the names. And then I'm so impressed. I mean, I knew you had some of these products and I knew some of the method behind it, but I didn't know it to this extent. And I think my audience, the keto campers, are just blown away right now because it makes so much sense. Part one of the fast, you want to support the NAD, you want to support the mitochondria, and then part 2, phase 2, which you want to support more of the autophagy, so you get these specific nutrients, and then part 3, phase 3, you want to support more of the MToR, the stem cells, but you'd also want to do it the right way, so some of those senescent cells are not going bad. So the 3 products that you mentioned for this stack, mention them again. What are the 3 main products?
So the NAD Max.
Nad Max.
For loading.
Like Mad Max, Nad Max.
That's working. That's it.
That's number 1.
And then while you're fasting, the phase 2 is Lucidol.
Lucidol. I've done that one before.
And then if you have access to ozone.
And ozone, okay.
And then phase 3 is MToR.
MToR.
And so optional upgrades are, if you really want to support your microbiome in its repair and regeneration, is high dose melatonin. But there was another one that we talked about, and this is in the article with Ben Greenfield as well, is something called Pro Biomax. And Probiomax is a spore-based probiotic with butyrate. And so it's in a suppository. So I love the fact that it's a suppository because it's going right where you need it.
Yeah.
And so the combination of the high dose melatonin with the Probiomax is really going to put you in your microbiome where you want it.
When would you take those two during the fast?
That would be on phase 3 after the fast.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you would take that in combination with MToR. Okay.
And then the Scenecent is what is going to. So the Scenecent, I love it post fast, but I also love to utilize it after I've done a stem cell. In fact, that would be really good for you right now
After the injections.
because the way that the PRP works that we did in your back is the platelets, once they get activated, they're going to attract growth factors that are going to then attract like a magnet your own stem cells to the area. So although we didn't inject stem cells there, they're going to be pulled into that. And so the more we can support them and keep them robust and keep them from going senescent, you'll have more collagen synthesis, you'll have more regeneration that takes place.
I want it.
Yeah.
Get something to me. Let's do it. That's the MToR.
Scenecent.
Scenecent, excuse me. Okay, got it. Where can they go find out more information about you?
Well, we have an educational site, ultimatecellularreset.com, and then we have a YouTube channel, Cellular Reset. And then, you can email us at info@mitozen.com.
info@mitozen.com. And what's your Instagram? Do you know it?
Yeah.
Is it glutagenic?
Advanced SRQ.
Advanced SRQ. And then if you're in Sarasota, or if you want to make the trip to Sarasota, I love it over here. Go check out Dr. John's clinic, Advanced Rejuvenation. Is it the website? Advanced Rejuvenation.
AdvancedRejuvenation.us.
So you have many options to discover more of Dr. John's work. You could go listen to the previous podcast we did. You go to his website. You go to his YouTube channel. Go read the article he did for Ben Greenfield. We'll put all of those links and resources down below. Anything else you want to add to the conversation to land the plane?
Well, anybody listening to this that feels overwhelmed by all this,
Listen to it again.
Probably some people, listen to it again, and it can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. We've talked about a lot of more advanced aspects to it. You can do this with just the NAD loading and just the Lucitol and just the MToR, and you don't need to have it as complicated as we've outlined it. We have been fasting for a long time, and a lot of our patients and clients have. So for those of you that are really wanting to jump in there and do a more complicated fast, then we're happy to be here to support you.
Yeah, and the overall theme in this conversation is there is a delicate balance taking place in the body between these two signaling pathways. We have MToR, anabolic, autophagy, catabolic, and if you could master getting a little bit of both, that's where the magic lies. That's where the body really begins to heal and regenerate and reduce inflammation. The problem is this: people discover fasting, myself included, back in 2013, and I fasted too much. I was getting too much autophagy, not enough MToR. And then the opposite problem is also true here in America. People are eating every 2 to 3 hours, getting too much MToR, no autophagy. So we want to make sure we balance that out. And this protocol is a perfect way to do that.
I agree. I agree.
Dr. John, I love the work that you do. Thank you for showing up in this world and creating some amazing products and amazing research and just getting the education out there. We need it. The keto campers need it. I need it. And I want to appreciate you for being back on the show for the 3rd time. I always have a great time with you.
Yeah, well, I hope to be a 4th.
We'll do it.
Maybe I can be the first 4th.
Maybe you could be the first 4th. Yeah, no, you're awesome. Thank you, brother.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.